Imagine discovering that the person you trust most in the world, the one who should protect you above all else, is actually your worst nightmare. This is the devastating story of a 15-year-old teenager whose life was interrupted in the most brutal way possible by someone she called Dad. A case that left experienced investigators in shock, that made a jury decide in just a few hours on the most severe fate possible, and that forces us to question how far human evil can go. If you're not yet part of our family here on the channel, subscribe now so you don't miss any real case that can make you reflect on human nature. On December 23, 2003, when they were still just teenagers of 15 and 16 years old, Joshua Burgess and Acacia Pope, students at Weddington High School in Matthews, North Carolina, became parents to a girl who was given the name Zaria Jocelyn Burgess. As happens with many young relationships that begin as high school love, the couple didn't withstand time, but both committed to raising their daughter in the best way possible, even while separated. Joshua, a 35-year-old man who had faced some problems with the law for aggravated theft and minor crimes, finally found stability working as a semi-truck driver. For years, this was one of the few jobs he managed to keep, since his criminal record made it very difficult to get other work opportunities. It was common to see on his social media proud photos of him with his daughter, whether at local fairs, truck trips across states, or simple everyday moments. In one particularly touching post, he shared a photo of the two of them at a fair, and wrote in the comments about how they had stayed awake until 1 in the morning, talking about how excited they were to eat sweet donuts. On another occasion, he posted a photo of Zaria getting her hair done at a salon and wrote, "Ah, the joy of having a teenage daughter waiting for her to fix her hair. I wouldn't trade this time for anything." Comments from family members constantly praised his dedication as a father, with an aunt even writing, "You're such an amazing father, Josh." And even Zaria's friends showed envy for the close relationship she had with her father. Zaria frequently accompanied her father on his truck trips, and Joshua proudly shared these adventures on his social media. For years, this dynamic seemed to work perfectly. The girl was described by everyone as a happy and carefree teenager who loved making people smile. She actively participated in her school's marching band and was also part of the dance team, showing herself to be a well-adjusted young person socially. However, as Zaria grew and became a young woman, beginning to develop her own personality and independence, she began confiding to some close friends that her father had explosive temper episodes that made her uncomfortable. She reported that during truck trips, which had previously been special bonding moments between father and daughter, he now went so far as to threaten to abandon her on the road during arguments. These behaviors made the teenager, who had previously looked forward to weekends with her father, begin to be reluctant to spend those periods at her father's house. She told one of her best friends that sometimes he would explode at her for no apparent reason, and that she thought he might have serious anger control problems. Meanwhile, her mother Acacia had moved on with her life and had another child with a different partner. She was very active in her local church, where she participated on the dance team, and frequently had commitments related to performances and religious activities. This meant that even when Zaria didn't want to go to her father's house, there was often no alternative, as Acacia was busy with her church commitments. On the weekend of August 18, 2018, Zaria, who was about to start her sophomore year of high school at Monroe High School, tried in every way possible to avoid going to her father's house. First, she texted one of her best friends asking to stay at her house that weekend. But the friend's family had commitments and would need to leave very early the next morning, so it wouldn't be possible. Then, she tried to convince her mother to come pick her up, but Acacia was out of town with the church dance group for a performance and couldn't go. It was as if the girl's intuition was desperately trying to alert her to something terrible that was about to happen, but all escape options were blocked. On Sunday morning, August 19th, around 9:24, Joshua walked to the Union County Sheriff's Department. Witnesses reported that he seemed somewhat lost, walking back and forth before finally approaching the reception. His words to the officer at reception were direct and shocking. "I'm here to turn myself in for homicide." The employee, following standard protocol, began typing on the computer to search for pending warrants under Joshua's name, but he abruptly interrupted him. "You won't find me there. I just killed someone." This statement immediately triggered all alarms in the department. Joshua was quickly taken to an interrogation room, where he provided specific details about what had happened, and, more importantly, gave the exact address where the body could be found. He told officers that he had killed his own daughter and explained how to find the body at his residence. When the first officers arrived at the house on Hampton Meadows Road near Monroe, they immediately realized this was not a common crime scene. 2 specialized investigators were called to conduct the investigation, and what they found was later described as one of the most disturbing and shocking scenes they had ever witnessed in their careers. Zaria was found lifeless in the living room of the house, completely undressed and with handcuffs on her hands and feet, positioned facing the front door as if it were a macabre and deliberate display. She had been stabbed multiple times all over her body, but the visible cause of death was a deep and brutal cut to her throat. It was obvious to investigators that Zaria had been a victim of extreme violence of an intimate nature for an extended period before her homicide. What made this crime even more incomprehensible to everyone who knew the family was that Joshua had regularly posted about his love for his daughter over the years, sharing special moments and demonstrating what seemed to be genuine paternal pride. A post from 2016, however, would gain sinister and prophetic meaning when revisited after the crime. A photo of him holding a knife with the caption, "I really like cutting people. Oops, I meant things. I really like cutting things." In the background of the photo, it was possible to see a collection of various different knives, suggesting a worrying fascination with these sharp objects. When Joshua made his first court appearance, there was an audible gasp of shock in the room when the prosecution explained exactly what had happened to Zaria. He was formally charged with first-degree homicide, kidnapping, and a series of crimes of an intimate nature against minors under 18. The state of North Carolina decided to seek the death penalty, which meant a jury would have to be selected to determine his fate, even though he had already confessed to his crimes. During the trial that followed, Joshua's public defenders tried to prevent his recorded confessions from being played to the jury, but this request was denied by the judge. The jurors were forced to hear in detail the evidence about the trauma Zaria had suffered, which was described as more than 24 hours of psychological and physical torment. The medical examiner also testified that, before having her throat cut, Zaria had been suffocated but had recovered from unconsciousness. What the confession recordings revealed was even more shocking and disturbing than anyone could have initially imagined. Joshua had not committed this horrific act out of anger toward his ex-partner, jealousy over her relationship with someone else, or even racial issues, as some speculated due to some controversial posts he had made on his social media. The truth was much more sinister and sick. He stated to authorities, without showing any repentance or remorse, that he was in love with Zaria, and that, seeing her grow and become an attractive young woman, he decided that no one else could have her. This revelation retroactively transformed all those affectionate Facebook posts into something absolutely disgusting, and made many wonder if these sick feelings had been present for years, masked as normal paternal love. In his own recorded words, Joshua coldly described how he had meticulously planned every detail of the crime for weeks. He recounted how he had taken Zaria to breakfast on Saturday morning, August 18th, while mentally crafting the macabre plans he would execute in the coming hours. He had thought through every scenario, hidden the materials he would use in advance, and prepared for every aspect of what he was about to do. In an absolutely shocking manner, he told investigators that that weekend had been the best 48 hours of his life, and that he enjoyed every minute of the horrific acts he committed against his own daughter. He described in graphic detail how he had assaulted Zaria, how he had cut and suffocated her, believing she had died during the process. The most shocking part of his confession was the revelation that Zaria, being a strong and determined young woman, almost managed to escape from her nightmare. She had recovered from unconsciousness after he thought she was dead, and, demonstrating extraordinary courage and willpower, almost managed to reach the front door of the house. It was at this moment that Joshua intercepted her from behind and cut her throat, definitively ending her life before repositioning her again in the living room. Joshua also revealed to police that he had initially planned to die at the hands of police after committing the crime. His original intention was to go to the sheriff's department and provoke a situation that would force officers to use lethal force against him. However, when the time came to execute this part of his plan, he admitted he got scared of dying and opted to simply surrender, showing himself to be a coward to the end. After 3 intense weeks of trial, which included testimonies from medical experts, legal examiners, family members, and victim impact statements, the jury retired for deliberation. Surprisingly, they took only a few hours before returning to the courtroom with a unanimous verdict: death penalty for the crime of first-degree murder. Joshua also received more than 70 years in prison for the other crimes, ensuring that even if the capital sentence were appealed, he would remain incarcerated for the rest of his natural life. The speed of the jury's decision was particularly notable considering that North Carolina rarely applies the death penalty, with the last execution having occurred in 2006. This demonstrated how disturbed and revolted the jurors were by the details of the case and by Joshua's total lack of remorse. The case raises deeply disturbing questions about warning signs that may have gone unnoticed over the years. Many wonder if Joshua's obsessive and sick feelings toward his daughter were a recent development, or if they had been developing silently for years, masked as a normal father-daughter relationship. The particularly disturbing fact that he chose to give his own name as his daughter's middle name gains an even more sinister connotation in light of the events, perhaps suggesting a possessive obsession that existed from her birth. Zaria's mother, Acacia, carries with her an overwhelming weight of guilt for not having perceived the signs, or for not having been able to pick up her daughter that fatal weekend. Close family members report that she constantly blames herself, wondering if she could have done something different to save her daughter. It's important to remember, however, that she herself was just a teenager when she became a mother and couldn't have predicted or imagined the monstrosity that would develop within her daughter's father years later. One aspect that continues to confuse investigators and criminal psychologists is the specific way Zaria was found: deliberately positioned, in a vulnerable and exposed display. If Joshua truly saw his daughter as a personal possession he wanted to protect from other men, why then expose her in such a humiliating and vulnerable way? This fundamental contradiction between his claims of possessive love and the final act of degrading display remains as one of the most puzzling and incomprehensible aspects of the case. Some investigators speculated whether there were ritual elements involved, especially considering that Joshua had liked controversial pages on social media related to extremist groups. However, his own confessions made it clear that the main motive was purely his sick obsession with his daughter, not any external ideology. Zaria's school, Monroe High School, paid a touching tribute to the young student by placing a graduation gown on the chair that would have been hers during the ceremony 2 years after her death. Classmates, teachers, and community members remembered her as a naturally cheerful and outgoing person who had the special gift of making others smile even on the most difficult days. Her promising future, which could have included a career in dance or music, was brutally interrupted by someone who should have been her greatest protector. This case serves as a dark and terrifying reminder that predators can be hidden in the most unlikely and trusted places, even within the nuclear family itself. Zaria's intuition that final weekend, her desperate reluctance to go to her father's house, and her efforts to find alternatives, suggests that perhaps she instinctively sensed the danger that awaited her. But unfortunately, there was no way for her to imagine the true extent of the evil and depravity she would encounter. Currently, Joshua Burgess remains on death row in North Carolina, where he will wait until his sentence is executed. For an entire community and a completely devastated family, justice was formally served through the legal system, but nothing in the world can bring back the bright young life that was lost in such a brutal and senseless way. If this case impacted you as much as it impacted me, leave your opinion in the comments. And if you have suggestions for other cases you'd like to see analyzed here on the channel, don't forget to share them. Your participation is fundamental for us to continue bringing these important stories, even though they're difficult to hear. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed and activate notifications so you don't miss any new content. Until the next case.